today's verse is at 2:1:6. 2:1:6. I'll say the verse, please repeat. Etavan Sankhya Yoga Bhyam. So etavan means all these, Sankhya means complete knowledge of matter and spirit, and yoga bhyam means knowledge of mystic power. Sudharma parinishtaya. Sudharma means particular occupational duty. Parinishtaya means by full perception. Janmalabha para pungsam. Janma means birth. Labha means gain. Para means the supreme, and pungsam of a person. Ante narayana smriti. Ante means at the end. Narayana, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Smriti, remembrance. Etavan Sankhya Yoga Bhyam. Sudharma Parinishtaya. Janmalabha Parapungsam. Ante Narayana Smriti. The meaning is the highest perfection of human life achieved either by complete knowledge of matter and spirit, by practice of mystic powers, or by perfect discharge of occupational duty, is to remember the personality of Godhead at the end of life. Etavan Sankhya Yoga Bhyam. Sudharma Parinishtaya. Janmalabha para pungsam. Ante Narayana Smriti. How about we try, you chant and then we'll respond, and we'll do that a few times. Etavan Sankhya Yoga Bhyam. Sudharma Parinishtaya.
Janmalabha para pumsam.
Janmalabha para pungsam.
Ante Narayana Smriti.
Ante Narayana Smriti. Etavan Sankhya Yoga Bhyam.
Swadharma Parinishtaya.
Swadharma Parinishtaya.
Janmalabha para pumsam.
Janmalabha para pumsam.
Ante Narayana Smriti.
Ante Narayana Smriti. Go ahead. Etavan Sankhya Yoga Bhyam.
Swadharma Parinishtaya.
Swadharma Parinishtaya.
Janmalabha para pumsam.
Janmalabha para pumsam.
Anta Narayana Smriti.
Etavan Sankhya Yoga Bhyam.
Swadharma Parinishtaya.
Swadharma Parinishtaya.
Janmalabha param parapumsam.
Janmalabha para pumsam.
Ante Narayana Smriti.
Ante Narayana. Now who can say what the general meaning of the verse is? Kṛṣṇa Prabhu? Would we like to offer him a microphone? Yes, we would.
The highest duty, or one's occupational duty of a human being, should be at the end to remember Narayan. So the first Sankhya Yoga Bhyam, I didn't get that part into the translation, so full knowledge of of everything, Sankhya, matter and spirit, and the perfection of yoga, mysticism. I didn't get that into the translation, so
I think you just did now.
The part I remember is that the highest duty of a human is to remember Narayan at the time of death.
All right. Anybody have anything to add to that?
So what I took away was maybe in the beginning you're not focused on Krishna. He's not the spotlight. But in the end, you focus on Krishna and he becomes the spotlight.
Okay, we'll entertain that idea in our discussion. Here's the purport. Narayan is the transcendental personality of Godhead beyond the material creation. Everything that is created, sustained, and at the end annihilated is within the compass of the Mahatattva, material principle, and is known as the material world. The existence of Narayan, or the personality of Godhead, is not within the jurisdiction of this Mahatattva, and as such, the name, form, attributes, etc. of Narayan are beyond the jurisdiction of the material world. By the speculation of empiric philosophy, which discerns matter from spirit, or by cultivation of mystic powers, which ultimately helps the performer to reach any planet of the universe, or beyond the universe, or by discharge of religious duties, one can achieve the highest perfection provided one is able to reach the stage of Narayana Smriti, or constant remembrance of the personality of Godhead. This is possible only by the association of a pure devotee, who can give a finishing touch to the transcendental activities of all Gyanis, Yogis, and Karmis, in terms of prescribed duties defined in the scriptures. There are many historical instances of the achievement of spiritual perfection, such as that of the Sanakadi Rishis, or the 9 celebrated Yogendras, who attained perfection only after being situated in the devotional service of the Lord. None of the devotees of the Lord ever deviated from the path of devotional service by taking to other methods as adopted by the Gyanis and or Yogis. Everyone is anxious to achieve the highest perfection of his particular activity, and it is indicated herein that such perfection is Narayana Smriti, for which everyone must endeavor his best. In other words, life should be molded in such a manner that one is able to progressively remember the personality of Godhead at every step of life. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Nena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Narayan is beyond the material creation, and therefore, previously, all the great sages worshipped him, because when we remember Narayan or Krishna, we become transcendentalized. As mentioned in the 2nd chapter of the Bhagavatam, Bhejure Muniyotagre Bhagavantam adhoksajam Sattvam Vishuddham Shemaya Kalpante Yenutaniha. So Bhejure means to worship. Worship comes from the word worth. When you put a ship on the end of a word, it becomes a noun. So originally the word would have been worthship, but by Sandhi rules, it's changed to worship. The essence is, what's the highest value I can attain? We tend to point our consciousness in that direction. That wasn't a very comprehensive sentence, but the point is, when we value something, we give our attention to it. And oftentimes, this is not well thought out. We're presented with various options for where to put our attention, some of which is based on outside influence, or perhaps all of it, unless we get good guidance. Those young people who are sent to like a reform school, the intention is to reform their behavior and their value system so that they can get the most out of life. Perhaps they've become wayward in the way they live or act because of bad association. And similarly, the Shastra says that every living being requires some reformation because of being affected by the atmosphere of the material world. And therefore there are, in the Vedic system, samskars. A baby before it's conceived is given, the parents create an environment in which the baby will appear. The environment would be spiritualized, and then when the baby's born, there are various ceremonies that are centered around God, so the baby will become godly. The child will become godly. So everyone has a sense of what's most important in life based on exposure to various kinds of association. Purusha prakritisto hi bhunkte prakriti jan gunan karanam gunasangosya sarasad yoni janmasu. We create our own path in life because of our impetus, which is gained by our association, and therefore we attain good and bad results. And if one is fortunate to come in contact with the culture of the Bhagavat, then one can understand that if one gives one's worship to Narayan, then one attains the highest benefit. Shemaya means that that's the best, the highest value you can gain in life is by connecting your consciousness to Narayan. Therefore, Bejare Munayo ta Agre. Agre means previously. There were very high-minded souls, sages, and they connected themselves to Krishna through this process of worship. And Bejare Munayo Tagre Bhagavantam Adhoksajam. Adhoksajam means Krishna, who is beyond the description of the material world or of the alphabet. One cannot fully describe his qualities and glories because they're unlimited. Sattvam Vishudham Shemaya, because he's beyond the touch of the modes of material nature, then one gets the highest benefit. And finally, Kalpante Yenutaniha. In this world, if somebody, by good guidance, by hearing from others, develops this sense that Narayan is my object of worship, or should be my object of worship, and then follows the path of these previous sages and acharyas and teachers who were good at putting their attention to serving Narayan, then such persons will get the same benefit that the sages did. And the sages achieve the highest benefit in life out of human life. So the idea is one should follow such sages, and then everything that is created, sustained, and at the end annihilated is within the compass of the Mahatattva, the material principle, and is known as the material world. The existence of Narayana, or the personality of Godhead, is not within the jurisdiction of this Mahatattva, and as such the name, form, attributes, etc. of Narayana are beyond the jurisdiction of the material world. By the speculation of empiric philosophy which discerns matter from spirit, or by cultivation of mystic power, which ultimately helps the performer to reach any planet of the universe or beyond the universe, or by discharge of religious duties, one can achieve the highest perfection, provided one is able to reach the stage of Narayana Smriti, or the constant remembrance of the personality of Godhead. This is possible only by association of a pure devotee who can give a finishing touch to the transcendental activities of all jnanis, yogis, and karmis in terms of prescribed duties in the scriptures. People have varied proclivities for the reasons I just mentioned. Is because of the way that we've had association in the past, and then we come into the world with a kind of predisposition towards certain kinds of activities. And the Bhagavad says that whatever proclivities one may have, whatever inclinations one may have, those can be dovetailed with Krishna, or should be dovetailed with Krishna. And if they are, then one can become perfect from that position, from whatever position one's in. As an example, in the Bhagavad-gītā, Krishna says, Yat karoshe yadashnashi yad juhoshe dadasi yat tapasyasi konteya tat kurushva manarpanam, which means that whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you offer, give away, should be done as an offering unto me. That's helpful, isn't it? Say yes. Because one might not know what to do with one's proclivities or the fruits of one's work, and become even more entangled. However, Krishna says, organize around this principle of giving to me. And in the Bhagavad-gītā, Krishna also says, Yagnartat kamano nyatra loko yam karma bandhana tadartam karma konteya mukta sangha samachara. This is really good news. Would you like to hear good news? Oh, I don't think you want to hear it. That is that there's a template that one can follow and use one's human life. Check and see if you have a human life. How are you going to tell? Because opposable thumbs? Yeah, there's a big difference between primates and humans. I was just mentioning that yesterday because while we were on Sankirtan, we were noticing things. Krishna allowed us to notice things because we were doing a sacred duty. And I approached this one gentleman in the parking lot, because that's all there was one big parking lot. And he seemed slightly hesitant to take part in our program. But this other guy was standing right next to him and looked at him and goes, "Do it." In Hindi, he just said, "Do this." And so the guy snapped back and he goes, "Okay." I mean, he snapped back into right-mindedness and said, "Okay, I'll do it." And I was watching how fickle the mind is. The guy's like, and the other guy goes, "Do it." And he goes, "Okay, I'll do it." So, how easily I distract myself. We notice that, Jagnarta Kamano Yatra, there's a way that we can become misaligned very easily in this lifetime. Human beings, right. And we were talking about, at that time, how interesting it is that we can show a human being a code on a piece of paper, because then after the guy said, "Do it," then we did it. we handed him the lollipop, we handed him the sticker, we handed him the book, and then we showed him the code, the cheat code, which says, pay up. And so he, as soon as he saw it, no words were spoken beyond that. He just turned around and walked to his bus to get some donation. And I was thinking how the human mind is equipped like that. It can look at a little code and then all of a sudden become activated in a certain way. And also, I was thinking how Sariputta Prabhu was talking about how there's a really big difference between a primate and a human. Because we are humans, we have opposable thumbs, but we also have something primates don't have, which is syntax. The reason he made the point was that sometimes people say evolution's simple concept. All you have to do is look at the clouds. And if you see a cloud that's small, later on you might look at it and it's become a little bigger. So that's not so hard. You can be a primate and then all of a sudden, through a few mutations, all of a sudden you become a human. But Sariputta was pointing out that the expansion of a cloud and the expansion of a brain are two different things altogether. He had a degree in, I think, mathematical biology, and he dealt with physics, and he dealt a lot with statistics and probabilities and so forth in science. And the probability of a brain expanding, if you do the steps, which was Sariputta Prabhu's point oftentimes, is like, it's fine to say that this becomes this, but then show me the steps. Like, did you ever have a class in school when the teacher told you, I want to see your work? Every day? Yeah, and then if you're a cheater and you're just copying the answer from someone, then it's like, oh no, I'm going to be up all night trying to figure out how to show my work. So he would insist that the people who claim that a primate brain and a human brain are the same things, just like a cloud expanded, it's no big deal. He said, well, then show your work. How did it get from one place to another? And then he showed mathematically how it was impossible to achieve that within a given period of time that most people agree on is the period of time that it would have required in the universal context that we have. So all that just to say, we do have a human body, and it's good to remember that because we have a capability. Now back to syntax, he pointed out that animals like Coco, remember Coco? You didn't know Coco? Coco was a gorilla, and Coco had quite a vocabulary and would communicate through signing. It was taught by the friend of Coco, I guess. And then Sariputta said there's a lot of words Coco can use, but when it comes to syntax, if Coco wanted a banana, Coco would say, want, banana, banana, banana. But Coco couldn't say, if you had had nice bananas yesterday, I would have taken 5 of them, but today I don't require any bananas. That requires, and as he was pointing out, linguistically and astronomically, an astronomical increase in complexity is required, or it is astronomically more complex to come to that point. So it's really rare to have a human body, and it's a gift of nature. It's not something that you can put in for it. You just get it automatically. So, given that facility, Jagnarta Kamanon Yatra Loko Yam Karma Bandhana Tadartam Karma Konteya Mukta Sangha Samachara, there is a great opportunity, which is that if you perform activities to please Narayan, or the Supreme, that's how you organize your life, then said you can attain all your necessities, and you also will attain liberation at the end of this lifetime. And so there's great benefit from remembering Narayan and organizing one's life around this principle. On the other side, if one doesn't do this, then one becomes unlimitedly more entangled in the material nature and has to suffer the consequences. Now, in the teachings of Rupa Goswami in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, he gives a method or the parameters, what it means to remember Narayan favorably, in a verse which is at the very beginning of his book, Anyabilashita shunyam jnana karmanyadavritam anukulyene krishnanu shilanam bhaktir uttama. So it means, he points out, that you have to cultivate this in your life. And the verb shīla in Sanskrit means a kind of cultivation. You have to organize your life around this principle and practice it on a regular basis in order to get ready to remember Krishna favorably. He also says that anukulyena means favorably, not unfavorably, like Kamsa, who thought of Krishna all the time, but he wanted to kill him. So that doesn't count as devotional service. And he said there's two parts to this shīla, which is internal and external. External means to use your senses in Krishna service, like seeing, smelling, hearing, and so forth, and your hands, manual. And also internally, there's, and if one adheres to this practice of devotional service as given by Rupa Goswami and the other acharyas, one can then develop a sense of love for Krishna, and one can also purify one's senses, he says, by using them in the service of Krishna. And he quotes another verse, Sarvopati vanirmuktam tapratina nirmalam hrishikena hrishikesha sevanam bhaktiruchite. And that is that by using your senses, your external senses, in the service of Krishna, then they become purified. So there's great benefit in remembering Krishna. And this morning, just this morning, as early as this morning, I heard Prabhupada speaking about how when we travel, we have many requirements to get from one place to another. For instance, going to a foreign country, and he said, requires a visa. He said for his coming to America, he had to show his bonafides, and he had to have some special paperwork. And he said for going anywhere, we need to prepare ourselves. It's not that just willy-nilly you can go from one place to another, nor can you willy-nilly just go back to Godhead by accident. It's a śīla, it's a cultivation that one enacts in this lifetime, and one develops one's bona fides, and you get a visa and a passport and so forth. You should have your paperwork in order. Like right now, we're already thinking about just going from here to Calcutta is a big deal, right? Say yes, otherwise you may be left behind. I mean, you've got to figure out how much you can bring. You got to figure out, is my ticket, is it my name spelled correctly, and so forth. So there's this sense Prabhupada was instilling in us, and in me by this lecture he was giving this morning, is don't think that it's something that just happens if you're haphazard, but be very deliberate about it. So this verse inspires us in this way to look at the end of life. Ante means the end, when you leave the body. And we've been reading every evening chapter of Bhagavad-gītā, chapter 15, in which Krishna gives the science of what happens when you leave your body. Shall we just briefly recall what he says? Okay. 7 or 8 people said yes. Everybody else, cover your ears. So first of all, he says, Shariram yaravapnoti yatshap yukramatishvara grihit vaitani samyati vayur gandam ibashayat. So he compares the moving from one body to the next as the way air carries aroma. And I think that you get a lot of sense for that here in Puri. Correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah? You pick up different scents? Yeah, you can walk on one road from top to bottom and experience the highs and the lows of the olfactory spectrum. It's definitely an odoriferous region. So you might smell some foul smell, or you might smell something heavenly that wafts through. And so in a similar way, our consciousness like that, it gets permeated by various scents, so to speak, of the material world. Some are very dark, some are very passionate, and others are full of light. But then there's the transcendental mode. And we saw the contrast yesterday, and we talked about it, just how we did visit the filthiest place on earth yesterday. We should have a little bumper sticker like they have, like, did you visit the caves of whatever it is? They have the Mystery House, I think, in California. I visited the Mystery House. We can have ours. We visited the filthiest place on earth. And it's like, where was it? At Jagannath Puri bus stop. There's no filthier place on earth. So then we saw how if you introduce into the filthiest place on earth the adhoksaja and the principle that's given in the Bhagavatam, that yes, focus your attention on the Supreme. How do you do that? Chant Hare Krishna. We could tell from a distance that the filth and the lower modalities had been pierced with great ferocity, actually, by the power of the kirtan that was going on at the other end of the parking lot. We could feel it from way back there. And you could feel how the environment was being lifted, which is one of the, it was a great wonder that could happen in such a filthy place. So there's a way in which the consciousness becomes affected and colored. So shariram yaravapnoti. So keep in mind that just as the air carries aromas, the kind of the flavor of our consciousness, which is also called karmatmaka, the way it gets a little color in it or a little scent, that's what determines how we're accommodated in the next life. So then he says, shotram. Shotram means you get a particular kind of ear, and check and see what kind of ear you have. I have a thing about ears. When I was a kid, I was looking at myself in the mirror, and I got fixated on my ears, and I think, those are really weird. You take it for granted. You see a movie star, and you go like, wow, they really look good. And it's like, look closer at their ear. It's really strange. It sticks out from the side of your head. It's got all these convolutions in it. But, it's a shotram. You hear through this. It's a little, what do they have? Those dishes to catch the television? Satellite dish, little satellite dishes. It's amazing. It catches sound in here. So you get a particular kind of ear. Like these kittens back here that were playing around very whimsically. Just like, hey, we're cats. We can do whatever we want. And they have these little ears that stick up so they can hear crickets, and then they go, catch them. That's all they can hear. They get a special kind of ear to hear that. Fish have ears. Snakes, I don't know so much if snakes have ears. But there's lots of different kinds of ears you can get. Shotram, chakshu, and then your eyes, different kinds of eyes. Sparshanam, your sense of smell. Cha, and then so there are all these senses that you get. Shotram, chakshu, sparshanam, cha. Rasanam, the tongue. We talked about tongues the other day. It's in the Chaitanya Bhagavat. It's not me. It's Vrindavan Das Thakur goes on about how there's all these different kinds of tongues. Animals have tongues. And so a human tongue's very different. Rasanam granam evacha. Adishtayam manaschayam. Vishayan upasevate. They all get grouped about the mind. It's a technology. You got a mind in the center, which is called the sense within, and check and see if you got all these senses. They're all grouped up here. The brain's in here, and the eyes are sticking out really from the brain, actually. Brain's inside here, and this eyes are really exposed to the outside world and taking in images from there. That's not by accident, Bhagavad-gītā is saying. You got that custom made just for you. And in your next life, you're going to get another custom product delivered by material nature, and they make no mistakes. There's nothing delivered, then they go like, oh, we blew it. It's a perfect system. It's called Daiva. It's mentioned in the Bhagavatam that's Daiva Netrena. It's delivered to you to your door by the FedEx. You get this, custom-made body with the ear, eyes, nose. Then he says, does Krishna, utkramantam. So krama means to step, and ut means out. So when you step out of this body, utkramantam stitam bhapi, you were situated in a body, and now you stepped out of it. And ukramanta sitam bhapi bhunjanam vagunanvitam. Vimuna nana pashanti jnana chakshas. If you don't know what you're doing, if you haven't prepared, then you're going to be totally befuddled, nonplussed, gobsmacked. Anything else? Huh? What? Dumbfounded, bamboozled, and you won't know what's happening. Your senses become deranged, and then you're carried by the force of material nature because of the quality of your consciousness at that moment. What moment? Ukramantam, when you step out, which is there is going to be a time when you can't stay anymore. And you're just like, okay, time's up, got to go. And then you'll be dependent on what you've cultivated up to that point. Then he says, what he said? Yatanto yoginas chainam pashantyatman yavastitam yatanto pyakritatmano nainam pashyantya chetasaha. This is all stuff we're learning in the 15th chapter. He says, those who have practiced during this lifetime to create a consciousness that's aware of God and to be aware of the fact that they're living in a body. You're not the body, but you're living in a body. This is called civilized human life and cultivation. Those who have done that, they're not bewildered when they leave the body. Whereas somebody who hasn't learned this, that hasn't practiced it, they become totally bewildered. They don't know what's happening. They can't understand it, but you can understand what's happening. So what's happening is we're getting what we've cultivated during this lifetime. That should be sort of an impetus. And the ultimate goal is to remember Narayan, to remember God during this lifetime. And that can be an impetus for us, or reflections in order to deepen the conversation.
Maharaj, you talked about what kind of consciousness I'm developing throughout my life. That is what will actually will come to our mind at the end, right? Something. So I was just thinking, even though we have taken to this path, the amount of time that I am giving to Krishna, chanting, reading, hearing, all that, is less than 10% of the day, maybe 2.5, 3 hours, something like that. So the big part of the day is going in some mundane work related to IT, computers, or something like that. So should I be assured that this 10% that I'm giving is so powerful that it will overcome the remaining 90%? Or what kind of consciousness I'm developing? Because given the time, it's very small, like this.
Yes, the 10% is a very powerful investment. If you can give 10%, you'll be successful. Based on the Prachetas, Prabhupada says they lived for 100,000 years. They gave 10,000 years for their intense practice, and they attained success. And he says anybody can afford to give 10% of their human life to this practice of Krishna consciousness will similarly be successful. And there's more instruction that Krishna gives in the Bhagavad-gītā about leaving one's body. And that comes in the 8th chapter, in which he advises that yang vapi svaran bhavam tajatnyante kalevaram tam evaitikonte asada tad pavita. That whatever you remember when you leave your body, same theme as we're talking about, that's what you'll attain in your next life. And I can talk a little bit about the mechanics of that in a second. Then he says, Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu mama nusmara yudyacha mayarpita manobhutir mami Vaiśeṣika samshaya. And what this means, tasmat, everyone say tasmat, means therefore. And whoever's cooking garlic, tell him really bad, super bad. Tasmat sarveshu means in all circumstances. Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu, in all time.